HOA illegally dumped sewage on my land. They had no idea I was a state environmental investigator. I've worked in environmental enforcement for 15 years. That means I've walked through fields soaked in chemical runoff, climbed over fences into illegal junkyards, and once memorably helped expose a composting business that was really just a pile of rotting waste. But none of that prepared me for the smell that crept through my own backyard one quiet Tuesday morning. It was subtle at first, a sour, metallic edge to the usual morning dew. I just poured my coffee and stepped out onto the deck when the wind shifted and hit me like a gut punch. I nearly dropped the mug. My name is Avery Morales, and at the time this happened, I was a senior environmental investigator for the State Department of Waste and Water Management. I handled licensing, enforcement, and investigations across 3 counties. The irony that I was about to investigate my own neighborhood wasn't lost on me. I live in a modest house on the edge of Willow Glen Reserve, a small but vocal HOA, managed community nestled beside a protected wetland. When I bought the property 4 years ago, I made damn sure the lot I picked backed directly onto a conservation buffer zone, peaceful, secluded, and legally shielded from development, or so I thought. The first red flag later that same day, I noticed something else. The tall grass at the very edge of my yard, usually thick, green, and overgrown, had gone yellow. The soil looked darker, slicker, almost like oil had been dumped into it. I crouched, slipped on gloves, and scooped a handful into a sterile jar. I always kept in the garage. Habit. Inside, I took one whiff and recoiled. Gray water, raw, untreated, maybe domestic sewage or stormwater mix. No permits, no filtration, no excuse. Someone was dumping effluent illegally onto my property, and I had a very good idea who. The next morning, I received an email from Greg Stanton, our HOA president. I've never liked Greg. Something about the way he weaponized smiles and passive-aggressive language grated on me. Dear resident, in response to community feedback, minor improvements to drainage infrastructure have been implemented along the south boundary. Please refrain from modifying ground features in that area. Regards, Willow Glen HOA. I reread the line, minor improvements to drainage infrastructure. Translation, you're not supposed to know we trenched a pipe under your land. I don't just understand these systems, I write the damn regulations. What they were describing wasn't a minor improvement. It was an unpermitted gray water discharge on private land, adjacent to a protected reserve. A violation. A massive one. I sent the soil sample to our state lab under a case ID tied to my badge number. A favor. I wasn't going to rely on assumption. 2 days later, the report came back. Elevated fecal coliform levels, high concentrations of detergents and phosphorus, traces of nitrates at over 8 times the legal threshold. This wasn't just dirty water. This was illegal discharge capable of polluting wetlands, poisoning soil, and destroying habitats. And it was being dumped on my land. Now it was personal. It didn't take long to find the source. At 6:12 a.m. the following Saturday, I walked the property line and found a fresh trench disguised beneath mulch and decorative stone. A pipe 2 inches, polyvinyl, unmarked, ran from behind the HOA's community maintenance shed, across the greenbelt, and under the edge of my property. They'd hidden the entry point behind a row of boxwoods. I took photos, GPS tagged everything, even deployed a ground-penetrating radar scan I had access to through my office. The scan showed 2 lines, one fresh, one older. They'd tried this before. That same afternoon, my neighbor Elijah King, a retired park ranger in his 70s, walked over with a thermos of sweet tea and a quiet look of concern. You smell it too, don't you? He said without greeting. I nodded. How long? Started maybe 3 months ago, he said. Greg told me it was just excess runoff after heavy rains, but my grass hasn't grown back since. I knew it was wrong, just didn't know what to do. You did now, I said. Elijah leaned in. There's more. I saw Linda Park, the HOA treasurer, talking to some contractor near the retention pond last week. He wasn't wearing any logo. No permit posted either. Linda, the quiet one, always smiling, always just following the board. I had a theory. Now I had a witness. That night, I filed the first internal report. I didn't name myself as the complainant yet. I wanted to see how the HOA would respond to a formal environmental violation report. Within 24 hours, they'd receive a state-mandated notice of inquiry, forcing them to produce permits and drainage blueprints. They wouldn't be able to. They never filed any. And when they realized who had filed the complaint, it would already be too late. Because I wasn't just a homeowner, I was the investigator. HOAs are predictable. They operate on illusion structure, order, community values. But when that illusion cracks, they respond in one of two ways: denial or panic. The Willow Glen HOA chose both. By Tuesday morning, Greg Stanton had received the official notice of environmental inquiry. I know, because the state's compliance portal timestamped his login just 3 minutes after the alert was sent. Exactly 37 minutes later, every mailbox in our neighborhood received a glossy, double-sided flyer: community drainage. Update: due to a minor administrative misunderstanding with the Department of Environmental Oversight, some clarification regarding recent landscaping improvements is underway. There is no cause for concern. HOA board, no cause for concern. My soil was laced with human waste. Their trench was inches from breaching a federally protected wetland, and they were calling it landscaping. That evening, I called Natalie Chen, a former intern of mine, who is now finishing her master's in environmental engineering. Sharp, driven, and, most importantly, obsessed with tracing illicit groundwater movement. I need your help, I said. Unpaid, of course, but potentially the most fun you've had in months. She arrived the next morning with boots, gloves, her drone kit, and that little smile she gets when things are about to go sideways for someone else. We did a full inspection, sampled soil at 5 locations across the buffer zone, deployed aerial footage of ground discoloration, scanned for lateral seepage. Her face darkened more with each reading. Avery, this isn't a leak. This is intentional discharge. Someone's diverting gray water, maybe even raw sewage, into this corridor, and they've been doing it for weeks. Exactly what I needed to hear, and exactly what the EPA needed to see. 3 days later, I received a hand-delivered letter from the HOA board. Dear resident, due to rising concern and misinformation regarding community drainage projects, we are hosting a special emergency board meeting. We welcome all homeowners to attend and share constructive feedback. Willow Glen HOA. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse. I arrived early, not to speak, just to listen. Greg stood at the front, red-faced but postured like a man auditioning for local office. There have been exaggerated claims about our water management efforts. Let me be clear, there is no sewage on anyone's land. We are fully compliant with local regulations. He emphasized local, because he knew state and federal law were a whole other game. A woman near the back raised her hand, Miss S. Alvarez, whose garden bordered the greenbelt. Then why did my soil test positive for bacteria? My tomatoes are dying. Another man followed, Mr. Daniels, a father of 2. And why did my kid get a rash after playing in the grass behind our lot? Greg stammered. Linda Park, the treasurer, stepped in smoothly. We've hired an independent consultant to assess all environmental impact. No action is being taken without review. Lies. I knew it. And now, so did half the room. The next day, I received a plain envelope in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a single document, an architectural blueprint dated 8 months prior, labeled WGHOA Phase the 3rd Expansion, Drainage Retrofit. The diagram showed a redirection plan routing wastewater overflow from the HOA's shared maintenance zone straight into a ditch bordering my property. Signed at the bottom, G. Stanton L. Park. They'd planned it, approved it, executed it, and never filed a single permit. Now I had evidence of premeditation. I didn't waste time. I compiled the soil samples, drone footage, Natalie's analysis, HOA blueprints, and copies of their public communications. I sent the entire file to Region 6 of the Environmental Protection Agency under the whistleblower protocol for groundwater discharge violations. 4 days later, I got a call from an agent named Carlos Ruiz. Miss Morales, this is egregious, he said flatly. We're dispatching a field unit. You'll be our primary contact on site. They were taking it seriously, very seriously. Greg and Linda had no idea the noose was tightening, because instead of coming clean, they doubled down. By week's end, another flyer hit our mailboxes, crisis manufactured by rogue resident. An individual with unrelated environmental employment has submitted baseless claims to federal agencies. The board assures you there is no cause for panic. They didn't mention my name, but they didn't need to. Everyone knew. My phone lit up with calls, some supportive, others hostile. I ignored them all. Instead, I reviewed the EPA's emergency injunction template and began marking known pipeline entries. Natalie and I flagged the trench coordinates using chalk and flags. We weren't just collecting evidence now. We were building a case. On a quiet Thursday morning, just before sunrise, I found a note taped to my garage door. Back off. Not worth what you'll lose. No signature. Just an oily thumbprint. Cute. I photographed it, bagged the paper, and handed it to the EPA team that afternoon. They'd arrived in unmarked vehicles, setting up preliminary equipment under the guise of surveying. I briefed Agent Ruiz in my kitchen. They're desperate now, I said. That's when people make mistakes, he replied. Good, I smiled, because I don't make them. That evening, Linda Park knocked on my door. Alone. No clipboard, no polished tone, just fear. Avery, please. Can we talk? Off the record? I didn't answer. She looked over her shoulder, voice dropping. Greg told me it was legal, said the runoff wouldn't reach any property lines. I never wanted this to get out of hand. I said nothing. The EPA called me today, she added. They're launching a formal inquiry. Greg says it's just protocol. I finally spoke. No, Linda, it's not. It's enforcement, and it's about to get real. She didn't reply, just nodded, turned, and walked back down my steps into the dark. As her figure disappeared between the boxwoods, I felt it for the first time. The tide was turning. The soil was still poisoned. The damage was real. But now it was their mess to clean up. 2 weeks after I filed the report with the EPA, Willow Glen didn't look like a neighborhood anymore. It looked like a crime scene. Unmarked vans came and went. Orange flags dotted the backyards. And the greenbelt that Greg once proudly called the jewel of the community was now surrounded by hazard tape. It was no longer about my property. It was about the whole damn development. The EPA team, led by Agent Carlos Ruiz, had moved quickly. Their ground scans uncovered not one but 3 unregistered discharge lines routed beneath HOA-maintained common areas. All of them converged near the retention pond, then funneled west under my property line, spilling untreated gray water into the marsh buffer. One pipe extended beyond the boundary into the protected wetland itself. That changed everything. Federal wetland, federal jurisdiction, federal crime. Greg finally lawyered up. A firm out of the city. Expensive, aggressive, predictable. They filed a temporary cease and desist order against me, claiming I had slandered the HOA and disrupted community harmony. Community harmony? They poisoned the ground behind my home. And now they were playing the victim. My attorney, Carmen Dorsey, countered with a motion to dismiss and a preliminary injunction to freeze the HOA's accounts. We argued the funds were likely being used to cover up illegal activity, including paying unlicensed contractors who'd installed the secret lines. The judge didn't hesitate. Motion granted. Their accounts were frozen pending investigation. Without access to funds, the HOA couldn't even pay to mow the park lawn, let alone spin their propaganda. Whispers turned into shouting. At the next HOA meeting held in a tense, half-empty clubhouse, Greg stood at the front, with Linda Park at his side, and tried to regain control. "We've retained legal counsel," he said. "This situation is being exaggerated by individuals with personal vendettas. We ask for your continued support as we address the concerns." He never finished the sentence, because Miss S. Alvarez, the same woman who'd lost her tomato crop, stood up holding an EPA report. "This isn't exaggerated," she said, voice shaking. "They found fecal matter in my soil. My dog got sick. My kids can't play outside anymore." Then Mr. Daniels added, "You told us this system was state-approved, that we were helping the environment. I saw the blueprints. You signed off, Greg." The room erupted. Someone shouted, "Resign." Another yelled, "We want a vote." Linda sat down. Greg walked out. While the neighborhood fumed, Natalie Chen kept digging. She traced the pipeline installation to a shell company, Greenflow Infrastructure, LLC, which, according to business records, had no employees, no office, and a single listed owner. Guess who? They diverted HOA maintenance funds to a fake company, cut corners on waste management, and dumped the result onto protected land to avoid city treatment fees. Estimated total savings? Just over $38,000. Estimated environmental fines? Upwards of $2.5 million. One afternoon, I received a call from Agent Ruiz. "Avery, we're moving forward with criminal charges. We've confirmed the pipeline was installed without permits, and funds were misappropriated from the HOA treasury. The DOJ is opening an inquiry." He paused, then added, "Your documentation, the blueprint, the drone footage, the witness logs, it made this airtight. It wasn't pride I felt. It was justice. clean and cold. The next day, a post appeared on the Willow Glen neighborhood app, written by Greg to my fellow homeowners. It's clear that certain individuals have chosen to escalate a simple misunderstanding into a media circus. For the good of the community, I am stepping down as HOA president. But he didn't go quietly. That same morning, several residents, including me, received anonymous letters claiming that I had falsified data, that Natalie was not a licensed professional, and that I was weaponizing my government position. I filed a defamation complaint. Natalie contacted her university, which issued a formal statement verifying her credentials and publicly backing her role in the investigation. They tried to bury us in lies. We came back with facts. The county board called a special open hearing to address the situation. Reporters showed up. The press had gotten wind of the story. HOA dumps waste into wetlands, exposed by state investigator living next door. I wasn't sure if I wanted to speak, but when Miss S. Alvarez took the mic and said, "We never knew. We trusted them," I felt something tighten in my chest. I stood. I didn't want to fight, I told the room. I bought my home here because I believed in the rules, in community, in safety. But those rules don't work when the people in charge write new ones in the dark. They didn't just endanger my land, they endangered yours, your pets, your kids, and they did it to save a few $1,000s. People nodded. One man clapped, then another, then the whole room. After the meeting, a young couple approached me with their daughter in tow. The mom said, "Thank you for standing up." We were too scared to say anything. I smiled. You're not alone anymore. The fallout was swift. Greg Stanton was indicted on 3 felony counts: environmental tampering, fraudulent use of HOA funds, conspiracy to violate federal wetland protections. Linda Park cooperated with investigators and resigned. The board dissolved within 2 weeks. An interim committee was formed, including Elijah King and Miss S. Alvarez, to manage cleanup, compliance, and repairs. I helped file the restoration plans for the wetland buffer. Natalie was invited to speak at an EPA conference. She titled her presentation, "The Pipe Beneath the Roses: How Local Corruption Pollutes More Than Just Water." The pipeline was gone, but its legacy would take time to scrub clean. So would the trust. But now, at least, we had truth. And that was the strongest disinfectant of all. If you had told me a year ago that I'd stand in front of a packed town hall, flanked by federal agents and angry neighbors, preparing to testify against an HOA board, I would have laughed. But there I was, the front row lined with media, microphones waiting, and the seal of the State Environmental Oversight Committee projected behind me. Agent Carlos Ruiz gave a small nod from the side. This was no longer just about my backyard. This was about everyone's. The town council chamber buzzed with tension. People who had once ignored each other at mailbox clusters were now united, shoulder to shoulder. Families, veterans, gardeners, retirees. They all wanted one thing: accountability. At the front sat 3 council members, 2 state environmental lawyers, and representatives from the Department of Natural Resources. Behind them were the DOJ observers and Ruiz's team. Greg Stanton, ex-HOA president, was noticeably absent. His arraignment was scheduled for the following week. Linda Park sat 2 rows back, pale, silent. She hadn't spoken publicly since resigning. I wasn't here for revenge, but I was damn sure here for the record. When my name was called, I stepped up to the podium and looked across the faces of people I'd lived next to for years but had never truly known. My name is Avery Morales. I'm an environmental investigator with the State Department of Waste and Water Management. But today, I'm just your neighbor. When I bought my home at Willow Glen, I believed in the promise of community, in mutual respect, in protection not just of our homes, but of the land beneath them. That promise was broken. A murmur rolled through the room. I paused, let it settle. The former HOA board approved the installation of illegal wastewater pipelines without permits, oversight, or disclosure. They discharged gray water and sewage directly into private property, and worse, into a federally protected wetland. Gasps, audible now. I clicked a button on the projector remote. Images appeared: soil sample results, drone images of pipe trenches, the forged contractor agreement. This isn't opinion, it's evidence. And the board didn't just lie to you. They used your HOA dues to pay a fake company tied to Greg Stanton's brother-in-law. They risked your health, your home values, your children's safety, and your trust. The room sat still. I didn't want to become the enemy. I wanted the truth. And when I found it, I acted. because no one else would. But I didn't act alone. This happened because of you neighbors who spoke up, who shared samples, who asked questions. That's how we stop people like this from any HOA, any board, any system who think they're untouchable. They're not. And with that, I stepped back. The room stayed silent for a second. Then came the applause. It didn't feel like a victory lap. It felt like a release. Following my testimony, the Department of Justice opened a full investigation into HOA financial practices, not just in Willow Glen, but across the county. Turns out, Greg's board had overbilled homeowners for years under vague line items like infrastructure enhancement and storm resilience buffer. One invoice simply read, drainage optimization, $12,400, no receipt. No explanation, just money siphoned out of an HOA trust fund, your money. The interim audit committee released its findings 3 days later. The highlights? $122,000. Sunakant for over, $46,000 paid to shell companies. No engineering permits filed for 5 major projects. HOA insurance had been quietly canceled months ago. They weren't just negligent. They were running a fraud ring in HOA clothing. It wasn't enough to expose the mess, we had to fix it. Natalie Chen, who was now something of a neighborhood folk hero, helped coordinate environmental recovery plans. We secured an emergency grant from the state to begin remediation of the soil and wetland borders. Elijah King, our elder neighbor with a retired ranger's heart, offered to donate time planting native grasses and rebuilding the buffer. Miss S. Alvarez opened her backyard for sampling equipment and baseline vegetation monitoring. The EPA laid out a 2-year restoration roadmap. It wasn't just about fixing what was broken. It was about making sure it could never happen again. And this time, the community wasn't being asked to trust. We were doing it together. A month later, we held a community election for a new HOA board. The mood was different, now less politics, more purpose. No secret ballots, no shady proxy votes, just homeowners with clipboards, printed records, and honest intentions. Elijah was voted in unanimously as president. Miss S. Alvarez joined as treasurer. Natalie, after some persuasion, accepted the role of environmental oversight advisor. When they asked me to join the board, I politely declined. I'll support you, I said. But I've seen what happens when too much power is centralized. So what'll you do now? Elijah asked. What I've always done, I smiled. Make sure people in power follow the law. 3 days after the election, I received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a single line typed in courier font. You made a lot of noise. But some roots go deeper than you know. It didn't scare me. It made me furious. They were trying to imply this wasn't over. That other hands, perhaps in city planning or real estate development, had been involved. They were probably right. But they had one problem. I wasn't going anywhere. A community reclaimed. We didn't just survive a scandal. We evolved. Fences that once separated became walkways. Yards once sterile with HOA-approved landscaping now bloomed with native plants. And on the old greenbelt, no longer drenched in waste, a wooden sign was posted, restored by the residents of Willow Glen. Protected forever. I walk past it every morning. The soil smells like soil again. My backyard is silent, no more humming trench pumps. No acrid odor, no secret pipes. Just bird song. And somewhere under the grass, a story buried deep, but not forgotten. The day Greg Stanton was sentenced, the sky was calm. No storm, no drama. Just the quiet weight of a system finally doing what it was supposed to. He didn't wear the smug smile anymore. No pastel polo, no HOA pin on his lapel. Just a suit that looked too big, and eyes that darted around like he was still searching for an exit. There wasn't one. The court found Greg guilty on all 3 felony counts: environmental tampering, fraudulent misuse of HOA funds, conspiracy to violate federal wetland protections. He was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison, with mandatory restitution of $1, $3 million, and a lifetime ban from serving on any community board or registered nonprofit. When the judge asked if he had anything to say, Greg looked straight at me. She set me up, he muttered. She wanted this. She never liked me. No apology, no remorse, only weakness, dressed in ego. The judge didn't flinch. Mr. Stanton, your actions endangered lives and violated public trust. Miss, Morales didn't destroy you. Your own greed did. Greg wasn't the only one to go down. Linda Park accepted a plea deal for cooperating with the investigation. She paid $78,000 in fines and agreed to 5 years of community service. The fake contractor company, Greenflow Infrastructure, was dismantled, and its listed owner, Greg's brother-in-law, faced a separate IRS audit, and 3 members of the zoning commission resigned quietly after their connections to falsified drainage maps were exposed. This wasn't just about one HOA more. It was about how deeply corruption had bled into systems meant to protect us. The remediation team led by Natalie, now officially hired by the county, spent 6 months replacing contaminated soil, replanting native flora, and installing transparent monitoring systems throughout the buffer zone. We worked with the Wetlands Conservancy Trust to place a permanent conservation easement on the marshland behind Willow Glen, making it legally protected forever. No HOA, no future board, no desperate developer could ever touch it again. The first time I walked the trail after the new wildgrass bloomed, I cried. Not because of the beauty, though it was there, but because we saved it in time. While cleaning out a box of old family records during a quiet weekend, I found something unexpected tucked inside the cover of a water utility manual she must have read during her early years. Avery, if you're reading this, it means the land is in trouble. You were always better at spotting things than me. If they push, don't bend. If they lie, don't back down. People will tell you to stay quiet, to be reasonable. But this land has roots. So do you. Fight for it. Mom, she never knew what Greg would try, but somehow she knew someone would, and she trusted me to be ready. 6 months after the sentencing, we relaunched our HOA not as an oppressive tool of control, but as a community-run, transparent collective. No board members with unchecked power. No secret votes. No more hiding behind bylaws written by bullies. The new HOA holds open monthly meetings, publishes budgets, online limits board terms, requires third-party audits annually. We added a community environmental officer position. The first person to fill it? Natalie Chen. She brought the house down at her first meeting, citing water quality stats like they were scripture. My house still stands at the edge of Willow Glen. The fence is still there, though the smell behind it is gone. The soil is clean. The birds have returned, but something's different. Neighbors wave now. We talk. We remember, not just the scandal, but what came after it, when trust was rebuilt, when we stopped whispering and started working together, when community finally meant something again. One quiet morning, I opened the mailbox to find an envelope with embossed gold lettering. No return address. Inside was a card. You've made enemies in high places. Let's hope your record is as clean as your lawn. No signature, no threat, just a warning wrapped in cowardice. I didn't report it. I didn't need to. Instead, I scanned it, filed it in my future evidence folder, and placed the original beneath a small stone in the garden bed I'd replanted last spring. Because I've learned something. Corruption doesn't die. It recedes, waits, looks for cracks. But now, I know where to look. People think stories like this are rare. They're not. Every year, HOAs across the country quietly fine, bully, and intimidate homeowners under the guise of property value. Some do good. Many go unchecked. But when the wrong people get power and the right people stay silent, that's when the rot spreads. I didn't take down an HOA. I took back a neighborhood. One pipe, one lie, one voice at a time. Welcome to Willow Glen, protected by its people underneath that, etched in small lettering, in memory of those who refused to stay quiet. And somewhere nearby, a pipeline lies buried beneath layers of clean, honest earth, just like the people who tried to hide it.